civil service, in local councils, is ridiculous. Jay is in London. He wants to talk about interest rates as well. Hi, Jay.
Oh, hi, Mike. Great show.
Thank you. What can I do for you today?
Yeah, well, basically, during 2008, I was working in Treasury operations, basically in the guts, the heart of the banking system in this country.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm seeing similar stuff here that we did in 2008 approaching. Yeah, I'm afraid to say, yeah. And anyone can have a look at this. You don't have to be an expert like myself. Just type in British pound, LIBOR 3-month rate, and it will bring you a chart up, and you can see with your own eyes that we're creeping up to 2008 levels. Now, the banks are now struggling to lend to each other.
I was going to say, explain to people what the LIBOR rate is, because they might not know.
Yeah, it's the interbank lending rate. So it's the amount that banks charge each other when they lend money to each other overnight. For example, if one of their cash accounts was overdrawn by, say, $2 billion, that would have to be covered by another bank, for a custodian, and that's the rate. And now the rate's going up. Obviously, the overnight interest rate's going up, so it's costing the bank a hell of a lot more money. Right.
Well, this is the trouble. So, and so, what happened in 2008 when this started to happen?
Yeah. So they carried on regardless, obviously. It's just the similarities of 2008. It's looking like a credit crunch 2.0. Is the best way I can put it.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, that is what people don't want, because what will then happen, presumably, is that money will become even more expensive and it will be difficult to then get, and then they'll stop giving people mortgages. Presumably people will then go to get their remortgage done, and the bank will say, well, we can't do it.
Yeah, and not only that, obviously businesses rely on it as well.
Yeah.
So, it's going to have a knock-on effect, but... I'm not going to say it'll be an absolute disaster, but it will, just to be aware, really, Mike.
Right. Oh, yeah, it doesn't sound good. Jay, thanks for your call. Jay, they're slightly worried that we seem to be going down the same route, and if you were around in 2008, you'll remember that it wasn't a very pleasant place to be if you were trying to get your hands on money. Interesting, because we had a call yesterday from a guy who was in the banking sector in 2008, and he said to me that the LIBOR rates, which are the rates at which banks borrow money from each other, effectively, are looking as if they're going in a very similar direction to what was happening in 2008. And he said to me that we are heading for a similar kind of banking crash.
Why, and I gave a press conference yesterday when I said that the Office for Budget Responsibility is being completely, utterly complacent in its forecast. It thinks that inflation for the next 3 years, after this current year, is going to drop to below 1%. It's never been below 1% for 3 consecutive years in living memory. So it thinks inflation's going to drop to that level. In reality, I think it'll be somewhat more than that, which means higher spending. It means also you're going to have a much higher deficit, which means the interest rates will have to stay higher for longer.
Keeps just putting its hand into some secret vault and pulling more money out of it.
Well, it's called the printing machine, so it just prints more money.
But they've just given the teachers a pay rise. They've already given the nurses a pay rise. They haven't settled with the junior doctors yet, but I dare say they will. But they've also given loads more money to Ukraine. They've given loads more money to the welfare state, because we've got 5 million.
They're doing exactly the wrong thing.
Yeah.
They are acting like socialists. They are raising taxes. They're raising wasteful government spending. They need to do exactly the opposite.
And only this week,
slash spending, wasteful spending, of which all of your listeners and viewers will be aware of in all walks of life. So you've got to cut wasteful spending and you've got to cut consumer taxes. That brings inflation down. And then you've got to invest that saving in that's how you grow the economy. You stimulate activity. Lower prices, lower fuel duty, for example. That will create more activity.
If their argument is we're putting up the interest rates to stem inflation, to stop it from going any higher, why then are they putting up the prices of alcohol and putting more taxes on basically sellable items, so people have to spend more money?
Because they are socialists and they are utterly stupid and they don't understand mathematically how inflation works. If you put taxes on things, guess what? The price goes up, inflation goes up, which is why we're advocating exactly the opposite. And the OBR also, their growth forecasts are, again, woefully optimistic. If our forecasts are right, then I feel our deficit's going to be 250 billion a year in the coming years, and that is going to lead to a debt crisis that your commentator discussed yesterday.
We will all have to pay the price. And meanwhile, the NHS is begging for more money, which the government is planning to give them. Meanwhile, there's going to be more money spent on this North Sea oil exploration and the expansion of the carbon capture business, you know. And again, it's all about money going out and nothing coming in.
And what we need is, you can't tax you out of a crisis. You've got to grow you out of a crisis. And the way you do that is you cut wasteful spending, you cut taxes for the private sector to get some growth going, to get some activity. That's what you've got to do. And if we don't do that, then we are heading in a doom loop downwards.
10th time in a row. It's increasing from 5 to 5.25%. That's the highest base rate since 2008. The bank says it expects inflation to be halved by the end of the year. That's one of the government's key targets. The increase puts pressure on borrowers, mortgage holders and households struggling with budgets. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, told GB News the government's plan, though, is working.
Well, the Bank of England forecasts today say that we will avoid recession, and in a year's time we'll get inflation down to about 3%, 2.8% I think is the number. So although it's very tough when interest rates go up for families or for businesses that have got loans, what those forecasts are saying today is that if we stick to the plan, it is working, and we will end up with a soft landing and we can avoid a recession.
Well, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, says the government needs to do something.
A family that's looking to remortgage their property is going to be paying, on average, more than £200 extra every single month, and for some people it's much more than that. The government need to take responsibility for the fact that inflation in the UK is much higher than it is in comparable countries.